Was the Bastion rework successful or not? Well, the answer is actually pretty complicated, but I think I have some insight as to the answer to that question. Now, there's 3 things that I learned with Bastion, so I'm going to explain them in detail, then review my own gameplay, explain some of the things that I did well, explain things I didn't do so well, and tell you exactly what you need to be doing better in your ranked games, no matter what rank you are, to improve at Bastion. Now, here's the thing with Bastion. I would say there's 3 aspects of Bastion that you really need to keep focusing on. The number one is the cooldown cycling of your turret. So we'll say CD cycle, but really this has mostly to do with turret. The big thing with turret is that people think of it as like this big tank buster, do big damage on frontline, but especially as you start to get up higher in the ranks, you realize that there's a lot more nuance with that ability. It's really your 1v1 tool. A Bastion without his turret form is useless versus a Genji, versus a Tracer, versus a tank, versus a support, versus pretty much anything. It's not only how you do more damage, it's how you heal yourself with the 50 armor overheal, and you also get the survivability of the tank damage reduction. So it's really important that I learned playing Bastion to time it perfectly. Don't do it too early, otherwise you might get it wasted before the fight even starts. They'll kite out your ability, they'll wait it out, and then they'll push afterwards. Don't do it too late. Your team might be at too much of a disadvantage before the fight's over. And don't focus only on getting kills with it. You see, one of the things I noticed with my turret form is that using it alone usually forced a lot of cooldowns. You would force people to split, force a Genji deflect, a Suzu, a sleep dart, defensive cooldowns from the enemy tank, and that in of itself can be a lot of value. The key thing is this has to be used at the right time, and that's often easier said than done. The second thing to focus on with Bastion is the grenade. Now, obviously, everyone knows that the grenade is an important part of his kit. However, I kind of underestimated how important it was. In fact, I realized that I really struggled to get meaningful picks and meaningful kills if I wasn't actually hitting the grenade. And in the case of Bastion, a miss is almost as good as a mile. The splash damage is actually pretty decent even if you don't hit the direct, hitting at a base minimum 50 damage, which is nothing to sneeze at. The key thing, though, is to actually hit the grenade. Don't just throw it out there in the middle of the enemy team. Try to hit a specific, preferably squishy, for that juicy 130 damage stick, and it detonates fast. Make sure that you take the time to aim this. I cannot stress this enough. It was the difference between life and death, winning fights, losing fights, winning 1v1s and losing 1v1s more often than almost anything else in my kit. The third thing with Bastion is the 3-step, the 1, 2, 3. It's a little bit like a dance. Think 1, 2, 3. And this has to do with his ultimate. When you use Bastion's ultimate, the key thing is that you want to be able to control an area and try and kill a squishy. You generally go for a character that doesn't have mobility cooldowns. However, even characters that don't have mobility cooldowns generally have the time to be able to move out of the way of the epicenter of the explosion. However, if you do the 1, 2, pause 3, during the first 2 explosions, you'll make them choose a direction to move to avoid the explosion, almost aligning themselves up for that 3rd explosion to hit them dead on. I found a lot of success killing squishies mid-fight by going 1, 2, forcing them to actually use their cooldown or rotate away from the explosion right into my 3rd ult. Again, 1, 2, short pause, then that 3rd explosion, the ult. So let's actually talk about applying this in game. And I wanted to use this match that I recently played on the new Junk City. First things first is I always have to look at my team here. I always gotta, is there anything that I need to know, I need to be paying attention to? And the number one thing that I understood with Bastion is that he is such a high risk, high reward character with that turret timing that the most important thing you can be focusing on most of the time is gonna be your tank. When is my tank going in? When is my tank going out? Am I running it with a dive tank? Am I running it with a shield tank? Because a lot of us tend to only wanna pick Bastion in a shield tank circumstance, but he's actually pretty flexible. For example, I found a lot of success running with a dive tank, would go in there, cause a lot of chaos. I would turret form and capitalize off that chaos. But you absolutely have to synchronize that pressure well, because if you try to go in early, I mean, you look at their composition, Soldier, Iliari, Kiriko damage, Mei damage, and obviously later on they're gonna actually swap to Ana and Sleep Dart Nade. Huge problems. If I wasn't utilizing my tank's pressure first before I'd go in, I had a terrible time in Bastion, regardless of what my tank was. With the enemy composition, I say the main thing you have to be looking for is range damage. I found a lot of difficulties playing Bastion versus biggie heavy poke damage, Hanzo, Widows, Soldiers, things like that could poke me out at range. I had to play cover and trying to find a way to get closer to them, which easier said than done with how slow he is. And then obviously crowd control, any sort of CC, especially Ana. Ana is a nightmare. You have to be very careful about the Sleep Dart. That being said, it's actually very easy to bait Sleep Dart, which gives my team a massive advantage. So again, looking at that poke damage, let's see how I do. So first things first, you notice that I'm letting my Orisa go first, create some stays, let them back up. I hit a big sticky on the backline, and this is what I'm talking about. I'm just gonna go and show you guys what the sticky actually does. Check this Soldier out. So he's gonna walk forward to try to take some space, try and do some damage. He's a little far forward, let's be honest here. I hit the grenade, and this is actually gonna force Soldier back knock Iliare back. That's going to force heal station. That's going to force beam. That's going to force Kiriko heals. And look at the space that I created with just hitting one grenade. And this allows my team to walk forward, ends up doing more damage. And the irony here is that grenade actually kind of snowballed our team. Because we kept forcing them into the choke from this first fight, it allowed me to get more and more and more and more big grenades. So it's really, really important that you do that. Now, this is an example of maybe a too early turret form. There's really nothing here that I'm doing that just a normal shot of a gun would do better in my recon form. So what I would prefer to have done is just hold the angle in here, try to wait for that Mei to walk forward to use that Mei wall, and either break down the wall here or peek out from the angle here and make that backline scared to follow up. This is like the timing thing. Was it bad? It wasn't terrible. I ended up kind of slowing down their Junker Queen shout push, but ultimately my turret form is expiring right now. And if you look, that's when the enemy backline is rotating. This is when I need my turret form starting right now. But unfortunately, it's already over. And I think, so the timing from my end, not so good. Again, another big grenade for me. It's going to hit a squishy, force a lot of cooldowns, forces her almost totally out of the fight. Again, another huge grenade. I mean, you guys can look at the amount of value that I get from these AoE grenades. That turret timing is totally fine. Mid-fight, controlling an off angle, another huge grenade. The more the enemy team grouped up in clumps, the easier it was to hit really fat grenades on them. Now you're gonna see the 1, 2, 3 here. Check this out, I'm gonna slow this down. So it's not exactly the 1, 2, 3. It's more of the theory here. So I'm going to use one on the tank line to push her out. I probably should have done this in the support, so this one wasn't well placed. I'm going to use one on the soldier on it to force them to rotate in one direction. So I've already hit a pretty decent damage. And you see, by forcing them in one direction, I've launched them right where I want them for my follow-up strike, which, to be fair, wasn't perfectly placed, but it's too late. They're dead now. And that's how you need to be using your Bastion ultimate. It's not so important whether it's 1, 2, 3 or 1, 2, 3, but you need to guide the squishies in the direction that you want them to go for that follow-up blast. And just off of that, we've already won the fight. Again, another great example of the importance of both turret timing and grenade. This one is actually done not to shoot tank. Notice that I actually prioritize squishies if they're available and as close as the enemy tank. Remember, Bastion is a huge tank buster, but tanks take a long time to do damage to. So if you see a squishy that's standing out in the open like the soldier is, do prioritize the squishy. And so again, great tracking for me. I'm the greatest of all time. This is a joke. Followed by a nice little sticky there, and that's it. Like, look at the time to kill there. Like, it's almost instantaneous. Even let my Orisa body block the sleep dart. That was definitely on purpose. Now, this right here is my first really crucial area here. So we're waiting for my team to come back, and I'm thinking, hey, I'm gonna put out a little bit of pressure early just to kind of force them out to prevent them from getting back before my tank gets here. But the problem is I pushed a little bit too far out in the open. So what ends up happening is I get exposed and I go, oh crap, I'm dead. I need to pop my turret form to get that damage reduction, to get that heal, to get out of cover. And this is what I'm talking about. I need to look at the situation and be like, what did my turret actually force here? And the answer is really nothing. A little bit of matrix, but by the time this diva is engaged in me, my turret form is already over. And so the fight has started now. My tank is just now getting here. My DPS is still not here, and my turret form is down. And this is like probably the most common Bastion mistake that even I'm making, where the fight kind of feels like it's starting, or you overextend just a little bit, and that turret form gets forced really quickly, and then now your most powerful spike in value, really the biggest reason, the only reason why you pick a Bastion, is now done. Not only did I risk dying there, but I wasted my biggest cooldown before the fight even started. And it's really important that you don't make that mistake. This is another example of the 1, 2, 3 though. So as bad as this fight started, check this out in the Cassidy. So I'm going to launch one grenade in the direction that I think he's going. He's going to use his roll in the opposite direction. See, I'm already pre-aimed where I think he's going to go. I accidentally miss here. This was a mistake. I thought he would go up the stairs. He actually flips up over the ledge, but that's okay. He's still heading in the direction I want him to go, and that allows me to lead my next shot. Now, what this actually does is, even though he doesn't die here, it forces a defensive nano, which is obviously huge for my team. So a similar mistake that I was making earlier, but I think this time it's a little bit more important to point out because it's a little bit less obvious. Kind of see here, my tank has started to walk forward. We've started to walk forward. I am behind my tank. I could be taking an angle left or right, but right now I feel the safest behind my tank. I'm going to shoot and pressure the diva out first. You're going to use a grenade behind the diva. Check that out. I'm aiming for the squishy. Look how close it gets to actually killing him. But it definitely forces him out of the angle, forces a lot of support tension. That's a nice nade. However, I rushed my turret form here. I should just simply have walked forward to the next corner, then pop turret. If you are getting your turret kited out behind cover, then that's when you really need to be taking a look at when you're actually popping your turret. I would need to pop turret about right now. This would be perfect to force the D.Va to run away, the soldiers to split, the caster would be isolated. They could run, but it'd be really, really uncomfortable. See, the answer is not to find a time when they can't run from your turret form, but to find a time when they can run from your turret form, but it will be extremely uncomfortable. It's not super hard just yet. And by the time that I make it uncomfortable, which is about now, half of my turret form has already expired. If I'd waited a little bit longer and had an extra couple of seconds of turret form available, I would have been in a much better situation to survive this fight and put out a lot more pressure. That, and I'm about to die to D.Va bomb. So this is a really important mistake that I make here, again with the timing of my turret. Now some of you are thinking like, why are you going on a flank as Bastion? Well, Bastion's okay on a flank because again, big push of power if you time it right, but that's the key thing here. So we're actually down one, we're actually even because the soldier's still coming back, and I see my tank walking forward, so then I start to take a flank. The problem here is I rush it. So I'm the first one to peek here. I even play around sleep dart pretty well. You see that? I expected the sleep dart, duck back in, and then I pop my turret. I miss my grenade. That's the number one mistake that I make. But the most important mistake, the number two, is that I actually did not look at my Zarya before I pushed. Remember guys, you can see your tank through walls. So even if you do take an angle or a flank as Bastion, sometimes it's okay. All I needed to do was look at the wall, see that my Zarya wasn't pushing, and then wait before I peek. I bet I look like such a jackass to my teammates right now because I'm expecting them to walk in, but all I really had to do is look over, see through walls, go, oh, they're not pushing, so I shouldn't peek this right now. I didn't do that. I'm gonna get basically destroyed. So I think this is a good example of a turret that's not necessarily designated to kill anybody, but it's pretty well timed. It gets pretty decent value. So I see my tank starting to walk forward. My positioning here is a little tough. I probably should have rotated with my tank and looked at the pop turret around here. Would have been a little bit closer, but regardless, I don't think my angle here is too bad. Now you're gonna notice something here. I'm going now because I see my tank engaging. Any pressure that they put on me right now is pressure that they're not putting on my tank. So while I know that I'm really not expected to get any kills out of this turret form, I can pressure their tank really, really hard. I can also pressure their soldier really, really hard. So they were doing this at a time while my team is actually walking forward. So this actually gets value here. Look at the D.Va, right? Look at this, look at the soldier. Has to completely disengage all the way out the fight. I have full D.Va matrix, almost D-Mecher by myself, and it actually forces a nanovisor here. Now, we still lose this fight because sadly we just didn't have any ults to respond with, but if they did not use two ultimates at the same time, this fight would have been lost because again, my turret wasn't necessarily going to get a kill immediately, but it forced them to split, remember that concept, at a really uncomfortable time / forced a lot of resources at a really uncomfortable time. Sometimes it's hard to see whether it's a good time or not. That's why I highly recommend checking out the replay viewer afterwards. A little bit of hindsight could be a great thing for knowing what to do in the future. And that wraps it up for a game that was probably more stressful than it should have been if I'd played a little bit better. But again, the main takeaways going back again is to really, really prioritize and timing your turret as perfectly as you possibly can, not just to secure a kill, but to force as many cooldowns or to force a split at a really uncomfortable time. Make it hard for them. Hit your grenades, especially on squishies, super, super, super high value, and try to get some sort of a rhythm with your turret timing on your ultimate. Don't go bop, 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 bop. Try to force them in a direction, lead them into your next shot, and you'll secure a lot more kills and win a lot more games. There's a lot of nuances with this hero. He's a little bit of a noob stomper, but I enjoyed playing him. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Take a vote if you have any suggestions for the next hero that I should go over, and I'll chat with you in the next video.